And as we're here in the second week of the program, take a moment to go back to your original impulse to come join Exploring Monastic Life, the course, or the life itself. And get in touch with that aspiration that propelled you to put the conditions together to make it here. And really bring to the forefront of your mind that pure motivation to explore the Buddha's teachings, to explore the possibility of using this body in this life right now to follow the Buddha's path in this specific way as a member of the Buddha's Sangha. Just think about all the causes and conditions that came together simply for you to have the aspiration. And then all the causes and conditions that came together for you to have met the Dharma, for that aspiration to have been kindled and inflamed, and all the causes and conditions to bring us here at this moment. And first we can marvel at that. And also reflect that every step of the way, our journey throughout how many lives we don't even know has been totally dependent on other beings. Even just the transportation to get here, I don't think anybody walked. Yeah, you live here, you walked up the hill, but who made the road? I really think about how dependent we are. And recalling that every one of those people that we've depended on is exactly like us. Wanting happiness, not wanting any problems, meeting problems again and again, mostly not having a clue how to be happy, trying so hard, and meeting with disappointment, life after life. And cycling round and round and round. Grasping at whatever bit of pleasure we have during the course of any given life in any form, dying to that life and into the next. So as we do this session together, we put all those factors together and think, I really am determined to get off of this wheel. And furthermore, I am strongly convinced that I can't just do it alone, and that through the force of the kindness shown to me throughout multiple lives, I cannot leave all these beings behind. And so in our session today, through our practices, let's make the strong determination that we will use this course, use this precious human life we have right now, however that direction takes it, to cultivate our good qualities, to work on eliminating the faults, the obscurations, and set our sights on full awakening for the benefit of all these beings who have been so kind. So Venerable Children asked me if I would speak on a very beautiful topic, the 6 harmonies of monastic life. I quite love this teaching. So I will. And we'll talk about it in the context of a couple of more contemporary things. But first of all, when we come together, as you know, we do the confession and restoration of precepts every 2 weeks, the posada or sojang, it is in Tibetan. And I think it's the first words once we get into the ceremony. The preceptor asks, is the Sangha in harmony? And the chant leader looks around and says, yes, it is in harmony. If the Sangha is not in harmony, we can't proceed. So harmony is a very, very important factor. It's not a word that shows up in many places. Actually, it's kind of funny if you think about the text. But it shows up in our Pratimoksha Sutra that we recite. So I looked up a while ago, what does harmony actually mean? So there are a few meanings, but this third meaning is harmony in the sense of forming a pleasing and consistent whole. So not the musical harmony, although that, has the same kind of feeling. Things are in tune or out of tune, we know it if we have an ear at all. This is harmony in the sense of forming a pleasing and consistent whole. For example, they say the villagers live together in harmony, or the Sangha lives together in harmony. Synonyms: live together in accord, in agreement, in peace, peacefulness, amity, amicability, friendship, fellowship. These are all synonyms. Cooperation, understanding, consensus, unity, sympathy, rapport, like-mindedness, unison, union, concert, oneness, synthesis, and formal accord. There is only one antonym listed: disagreement. It covers it all. Is the Sangha in harmony, or is the Sangha in disagreement? We had a lesson in harmony here early on. Venerable Children tells a story every time she teaches on the 6 harmonies, so I'm going to tell it too. This is about 2007, 2008, early-ish. And in those days, the whole Abbey lived in Ananda Hall. By then, maybe we had built Venerable's writing studio, so she wasn't actually in that physical building. Yeah, we'd made the community room, but that was just for guests. No, I slept there for a while. But for the most part, everything happened in that building. We cooked in there, we ate in there, we practiced in there, we had teachings in there, our offices were in there, guests stayed in there. I had an office downstairs, and I was at my desk pretty much a lot, and the guests would have to come in and take a nap behind me on the bed in the same room with me. Oh, I don't think it was so pleasant for the people who needed to nap during the day. So we knew it was time to expand, and so the first thing that we had to do was to open up the kitchen dining area. We figured a remodel would help give us more space, because at the time we could seat maybe 18 or, and that dining, I can't remember, maybe 16. It was hard. But anyway, by the time we expanded it, we got up to 26 seats. You couldn't do anything else there, but you could sit and eat. But anyway, so it was time to remodel, and we had a person here who was quite gifted at that sort of thing. So he was going to take on the project. It was going to be a community event. And the way I remember this conflict was a little bit different from Venerable's, but it was right at the end of the winter retreat, and we were about to have our first Sharing the Dharma Day. On that Sharing the Dharma Day after the first retreat, we invite all the people who have been supporting us through the winter to come. We have a puja. We offer gifts to the volunteers. It's quite a big festive event. And the person who was in charge of this remodel had invited his dad to come help him, who was a contractor, and they wanted to start the morning of the Sharing the Dharma Day. I and the other Southerner who lived here at that time, who were raised on manners, and you don't invite people to your house and then tear down the wall in front of them. You invite people to your house, and when the party's over, then you start tearing down the wall. But for the construction crew, my dad's only here a few days. Every hour counts. We're going to start at 9 o'clock. So we started in. We need to do this. That's not right. It's rude to do that. No, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And the bickering just kind of, and people started to put in their 2 cents, and the talking got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. My memory is that Venerable Children, sometimes she has a Manjushri sword, right? It literally went like this. Stop. Everybody stopped. And she said, if we are going to quarrel, there's no point in remodeling this kitchen. No one will want to come here. No one will want to live here. Harmony is the basic value by which we will live. Otherwise, there's no point. As I recall, there was a bit of silence after that. The construction crew did what they wanted to do. Sharing the Dharma Day went on just fine. And that vivid memory of that harmony has stayed with us as the basic fundamental value. It's not always expressed. It's not in the text per se. I don't think we have a big thing on the wall that says, I bow to harmony, although we probably should. But it is. Then a few years later, when we started to do the posada together, we had enough fully ordained nuns to be able to do the practice and began to recite this text. We see it in the Pratimoksha Sutra recitation over and over and over. Several times throughout the text is the question, is the Sangha in harmony? It is in harmony. If the Sangha is in harmony, it is allowed to do the pasama. Only, and the intro verse is, only when the Sangha is in harmony is it allowed to perform the posada. And the dedication verse at the end, there's a line that says, the harmony of the assembly is the surest factor for nirvana. That's a very bold statement. The harmony of the assembly is the surest factor for nirvana. Because when the community is in harmony, performing our duties, supporting each other in the way that the Buddha taught in the sutra I'm about to explain, then all the factors have come together for people to be able to really have the conditions to do their practice, transform their minds. So this harmony in the Sangha is very, very important. There's a story, so I'll tell you what they are. The 6 harmonies that the Buddha taught to share in support of their spiritual practice and to bring about the highest good for themselves and others. The 6 harmonies are to be harmonious physically, to be harmonious verbally, to be harmonious mentally, to be harmonious in the precepts that we keep, to be harmonious in the views that we hold, and to be harmonious in how we share the requisites that we receive. And although this was given as guidelines for the Sangha, I've taught this at the Unitarian Church. There are very good guidelines for any assembly. They're easily adapted. So there's a sutra story that comes from this, and I've taken the story from a few different sources. The first part is a remake from Thich Nhat Hanh's version of the story and from the sutra. But it goes back to a time when during the Buddha's time, at the town of Gosira, there was a conflict between a sutra master and a precept master over something really stupid, like most of our conflicts are. How soon to start the wrecking ball, please? A sutra master forgot to clean out the wash basin he had used. And so the precept master charged him with the violation of a lesser precept. The sutra master, being very proud, said that since he had not intended to leave that bowl dirty, he was really not at fault. Does that ring a bell to anybody? I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't commit a fault because it wasn't intentional. Well, students on both sides, so each of these monks had students, right? So they began to take sides. The sutra master who had made the mistake, all of his students said, he doesn't make mistakes. He didn't do that intentionally. There's no fault. The precept master, who is in charge of helping people keep the precepts, and all of his students says, fault or no fault, we have a precept. If you don't know, just because you don't pay attention doesn't mean you didn't make a fault. So the fight really began to solidify in this community. The people took sides, and then finally the precept master publicly announced the sutra master's transgression and forbade him from attending the sojang, the posada, until he formally confessed before the sangha. Well, pride versus pride, right? It just got worse and worse and worse. Both sides were really speaking badly of each other. There was harsh words. Harsh words flew like poisoned arrows, the text says. So one day, some monks really got fed up, and they went to the Buddha. And they said, please, will you come and intervene? So as soon as the request was made, the Buddha went right there. He went to the precept master and told him, we should not become too attached to our own viewpoint. Write this down. Junie. We should not become attached to our own viewpoint. We should listen carefully in order to understand others' viewpoints. We should seek all means to prevent the community from breaking up. Then he went to the sutra master and he said exactly the same thing. We should not become too attached to our own viewpoint. And then he expected the two to reconcile and went back to his place. The Buddha's intervention had almost no effect whatsoever. Too many ill words had been spoken, wounds had been inflicted, people were suffering. The lay disciples heard about it, they were horrified. The other religious sects heard all about it. They were horrified. Everybody was talking about it. Talking. So again, one of the monks went to the Buddha and pleaded with him, please come intervene again. So the Buddha got up, put on his outer robe. He went at once to the monastery's meeting hall. They rang the bell to summon the community. When everybody came, the Buddha said this, please stop arguing. It is only creating division in the community. Please return to your practice. If we truly follow our practice, we will not be victims of pride or anger. Write that one down. If we truly follow our practice, we will not be victims of pride or anger. Then one monk stood up and said, Master, please don't involve yourself in this matter. Return and dwell peacefully in your meditation. This matter does not concern you at all. We are adults and capable of resolving this on our own. What? To the Buddha? But can you recognize that mind in your own mind? Please don't bother yourself with this, Venerable. It's no problem. We'll take care of it. Please don't tell me what you think, Venerable. We'll take care of it. Dead silence followed the monk's words. You can interpret the silence yourself. The Buddha stood up. He left the meeting hall. He returned to his hut. He picked up his bowl. He walked into Kosambi for alms. He finished his alms rounds. He entered the forest to eat alone. He stood up. He walked out of Kosambi. He headed for the river. He did not tell anyone of his departure, not even his attendant, not Venerable Ananda. He just kept walking. He entered another, I cut this part out, but he met another monk that he knew who was living alone in a forest. He commented, oh, how nice it is to live alone sometimes. He kept walking. He kept walking. And then he went to the eastern bamboo forest, which was not far away. And he was about to enter that forest, and the groundskeeper stopped him. He said, oh, please don't go in and you'll disturb the monks, because he didn't recognize who he was. But the monk was Venerable Anuruddha, who was his student. And Anuruddha came out and he said, oh, no, please, this is my teacher. Please let him come in. So he was there. Anuruddha was living there with Nandaya and Kimbala, whatever those names are, happily. And they were so happy to see the Buddha. So they brought him a seat, they brought him water, they had him wash his feet. And the Buddha asked him to be seated. So the Buddha sat down and the monks joined their palms. And the Buddha asked, are you content here? How is your practice going? And Anuruddha said, oh, we're very content here. It is very calm and peaceful. We all make progress in our practice. And the Buddha asked, do you live in harmony with one another? And Anuruddha said, Lord, we care deeply for each other. We live in harmony like milk and water. The Buddha nodded his approval. But Anuruddha, how do you live together in harmony? With mutual appreciation and agreeability like milk and water mixed, regarding each other with eyes of love. And this is a beautiful statement that Anuruddha came back to him and said, this is from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Bhante, as to that, I think it is a gain for me. It is a great gain for me that I am living with such companions in the holy life. I maintain bodily acts of loving kindness towards those venerables, both openly and privately. I maintain verbal acts of loving kindness towards them, both openly and privately. I maintain mental acts of loving kindness towards them, both openly and privately. I consider, why should I not set aside what I wish to do and do what they wish to do? Then I set aside what I wish to do and do what they wish to do. We are different in body, but one in mind. That is how, Bhante, we are living in concord, with mutual appreciation, without disputing, blending like milk and water, viewing each other with kindly eyes. Good, good, said the Buddha. I hope that you all abide diligent, ardent, and resolute. And the Buddha stayed for 3 months. Before he left, he said, monks, the very nature of a sangha is harmony. The very nature of a sangha is harmony. And I believe harmony can be realized by the following principles. And then he gave the teaching on to be harmonious physically, verbally, mentally, to be harmonious in the precepts, and to be harmonious in views, and be harmonious in how we share the requisites. So the teaching, really, the nut of it is right there in what Anuruddha said. It is a gain for me that I'm living with these wonderful companions. And therefore, I maintain bodily acts of loving kindness openly and privately. Maintain verbal acts of loving kindness openly and privately. Loving acts mentally. Why should I not set aside my own wishes when they want me to do something, when we want to do something? Now, that is hard to do for those of us from the worldly life, caught up in our, I want what I want when I want it, but as an aspiration for how to practice and how to hold each other in community. It's really a recipe for amazing harmony, I think. So let's look at them individually a little bit. So living in harmony physically. So here's the sutra text, the way that comes. So that Buddha said, here a monk or a monastic maintains bodily acts of loving kindness towards his fellow monastics, both openly and privately. This is a principle of cordiality that creates affection and respect and conduces to cohesiveness, non-dispute, concord, and unity, which were all synonyms to harmony, right? Cohesiveness, non-dispute, concord, and unity. So it's living together physically, harmoniously and physically, at its grossest level means we don't beat up on each other. We have precepts about nuns. Do not get angry with the nun that you're living with and drag her bedding out and throw it on the ground. It's possible to get angry enough to not be in harmony physically. Generally speaking, we do okay with that. Sometimes throwing towels, throwing rags and anger, anger gets a hold of us and we may... Bananas? You've had the banana thrown at you? Yeah. Oh! Okay, throwing bananas. Anger gets hold. But generally speaking, it is about keeping our hands to ourselves and not throwing bananas at each other. Because what kind of, it lends of an environment of safety. Creating this sense of safety when we're living together in harmony physically. It also means we take care of each other. So if somebody is sick, we make sure they get fed. Or we make sure they're okay. Or if somebody has to go to the doctor, we take them to the doctor. And sometimes that was not on my agenda today. I had a list of other things to do. It had nothing to do with taking food to this person. Besides which, they happen to be a person who's not going to eat a single thing that's on the lunch table today. Now, what do I do about that? I don't want to have to deal with that. But when we're caring for, if we have the mind that's caring for each other physically, then we can set that aside. But we have to practice it. So none of these, as I'm saying these, this is the ideal. None of these are things that we should automatically have because now we're ordained. Or we should automatically have because now we're in community. But they are things to keep in mind so that we can work with our own self-centeredness that keeps us from being able to be in harmony with others, right? Right? So see it that way. So if we can see that caring for each other is actually a privilege that sits within the context of it is a great gain for me to be in relationship with these people. It is a great gain that I live in harmony with this spiritual community. Then we'll want to care for each other physically and be in harmony physically. The second one, to be harmonious verbally. Harder? Oh, please. So much harder. So much harder. To speak of others' good qualities, both publicly and privately. Generally, would you say you were more inclined to speak of others' good qualities publicly and privately, or their not so good qualities publicly or privately? Yes?
If it weren't for the quote in the bathroom here.
Uh-huh.
Seeing one positive quality in another is better than 1,000 negative.
You wouldn't think of it at all?
Oh, I would definitely think of 1,000 more negative.
Yeah. That's a beautiful quote. Can you do it? Seeing one good quality in others is more valuable. No, seeing one fault in myself is more valuable than seeing 1,000 faults in others. But there's also about a good quality. Cultivating one good quality or speaking of their good qualities is also in the quote. Yeah, when you speak of others, speak of their good qualities, right? Yeah. Not so easy to do. And there's so many different ways when we lack mindfulness or when we are afflictions that overcome our own mind. Sometimes we're simply misinterpreted. That's true. Or sometimes we're not so skillful in our interpretation or in our communication, and without even wrong intent. But we get heard that way. That happens. But sometimes too, when the affliction is up, we may not even be so aware that the intent to harm is there. Sometimes I've been called on speech that I thought was just fine. If I looked at it later, I was like, ooh, that was a little stingy. There was an intent to harm. I wasn't aware of it at the time. That wasn't, if you said, and they did, that was not so nice. I'm like, it was fine. Oh, it wasn't fine. But I wasn't aware of the anger that I had behind it. Sometimes, we deceive others because we want to look better. It's a small deception, but we want to cover up a mistake or we want to puff up a little bit how we appear. This too gets us out of harmony in our speech. And certainly we badmouth people behind their back. Some people don't have any problem ridiculing others to their face. If you don't like conflict, you're more inclined to do it behind their back. But we're all inclined to do it one way or the other, right? Gossip. Then we get the whole little clique, the whole little group that talks about the person behind or the group behind their back. And then we're starting to edge toward what happened in the Buddha's time. This group doesn't like this group thinks this group is arrogant, this group thinks this people's trying to overpower them. Conflict, big conflict comes. So using our speech to create disharmony is extremely easy. And it is really, really, really the thing we have to watch. It creates so much bad feeling in people. Harsh speech, wrong speech, negative speech. It's so convenient, this weapon. It's right here. So you don't have to load it. You don't have to fire it. You don't even have to, what is it called? Cocking the gun. You don't have to do anything. You just open your mouth. So this harmony in speech is something to be really strongly practiced within community. And to help each other. Yeah, to really help each other when we hear ourselves sliding into negative speech about others. To really catch it and not be afraid to. Say, I'm not so sure I want to speak this way about this person. So I would say that to abide in harmony is especially important. That's a quote, that's a big thing by Venerable Children. So the antidotes to that, to work with that, are to really spend time thinking that we're all the same. Same antidotes to anger, really. We're all the same. We all want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. We spend time with that quote from His Holiness of acknowledging our own faults to ourselves without beating ourselves up. That's not the point. But to recognize that we are not perfect. When we're busy judging everybody else, we're not paying much attention to what our own faults are. And we see everybody's faults quite easily. We don't see our own so easily. So to cultivate a mind that's looking for the good qualities in others, and also looking for the good qualities in ourselves. We're a little bit deficient in that too, I think. And that builds us the self-confidence that then is no longer trying to establish our sense of self by denigrating the people around us. That idea that if I have a kind of a low self-esteem or I'm not so sure of my position, then if I get together with somebody and trash the others, then what's the outcome? I'm better. We're better. We don't do that. At least we don't do that. Right? So we up our status a little bit. So it's a really kind of
backhanded, weird way to try to boost our own self-esteem. Competitiveness comes in there with that too. Comparing ourselves, trying to see who's up, who's down, who's better, who's worse. So we see this in so many different teachings, so many different antidotes of how to work with our mind that teach us to try to look for the good qualities in others, to appreciate the good qualities, and to appreciate others' contributions too. Which takes us to the third harmony, which is to be harmonious mentally. Now, the speech only comes from having done this work mentally. We can only speak of others' good qualities if we've thought about it and identified them. So that's one aspect of being in harmony mentally. I think another aspect that is holding in mind, I am a part of a community. For most of us, even though we came from a family, maybe, families of different types, different levels of dysfunction, I think probably universally dysfunctional, but different levels of dysfunction. But to come into, I'm in a spiritual community. And whether that means in my Dharma center or in the Sangha community itself, I'm a piece. I'm one player on this team, on this very big team. To be aware of my role. It's funny, I was just thinking of, excuse me guys, but I used to play softball when I was young, and I wasn't very good at it, or volleyball. I love playing volleyball. But, and I say, excuse me guys, because I had to stop playing because I would get so angry that I would be on a line and the ball would be coming to me, I would have it. And then some guy who was about 1.5 feet taller than I am would come behind me and take the ball. I had it. But sometimes there were people, and mostly it was guys because they were always bigger, but there were also people that I played with where everybody knew their place on the court. And they let you take the ball. And you do it. You hit the ball and you hit to the other person, then you hit the other person, three things, and then it goes over the net. Bing, bing, bing. If you mess up, we're talking sandlot beach volleyball, nobody's going to lose their salary if I mess up either. Or their salary if they come over and take my place and knock the ball out of bounds. But being aware when we're in the sense of community that we're all on a team together, working together. Or similarly in a performance, like on stage. You know when it's your turn to take the stage. You don't just stand there and shine and try to take it over when other people are talking. We all have been on stage with actors who do, but the teamwork that you learn is to step up when you step up, to step back when it's time to step back, to lead when it's time to lead, to support when it's time to support. We all have times when we are asked to lead, and we all have times when we're asked to follow. And so to be in harmony mentally, to hold ourselves as a part of a body, as a part of a community or a part of a team, contributes to that harmony mentally. Does that make sense? The other thing about being harmonious mentally is where the direction that the Buddha gave about don't be attached to our own ideas. There can be different ideas. There can be different approaches. There are 1,000 different ways to make kale, for example, or I don't know. There's a lot of different ways to boil an egg, for that matter. There are a lot of different ways to pick apples from a tree. There are a lot of different ways to oil a barn. We can have different opinions, but they don't have to be conflicts. They become conflicts when we cling to, I didn't intentionally leave my dirty bowl. You have erred. When we cling to those ideas, that's when we get into conflict, and that's what brings the whole community along with us. So to be in harmony mentally is also to look at when I can give my idea, when I can let it go. when I can see, as Anuruddha says, if they want to do it a certain way, then I let them. I go along with it. I'm happy to do it a certain way. And there are also times when you know that we're heading down the wrong path and you need to speak up. So we have to learn to discern that as well. It's not like I'm going to come to the community and just not think anymore. I'll just follow along, because everybody's contribution is important. It's harder. It's harder than just surrendering. We have to be mindful and aware about when participation, about always participating. Sometimes participation is letting go. Sometimes participation is more strongly served by, I really think that we need to look at this view. Yeah? Then we get into harmony in the precepts. Harmony in the precepts actually supports the other three, the first three, tremendously. We're following the same guidelines. We're following the same precepts from the Buddha, and we study those, we're aware of those, we practice those, and they are about supporting our behavior to grow upright in harmony together. We follow the same guidelines as far as the Abbey rules, the community rules. Everybody is supposed to be at breakfast to do your prayers. And we come to breakfast and do our prayers. And when we're all following the same guidelines, what I see is that it contributes to the sense of safety in the community. When, people sometimes go through periods where they're just not wanting to do the guidelines, which also happens, and we can cope with that, we can handle that. But you can see the sense of security gets a little out of balance, because then the things that we can predict, meditation happens at 5:30, breakfast happens at 7, lunch happens at 12 or 12:30, depending. Medicine meal, those things that are supposed to be constant are the structure that we hang our life on. Every day is different. Things are changing constantly. But when when people are not so in line with these things, then that sense of stability and that sense of safety seems to dissolve a bit. Do you agree? Yeah? Is that your experience too? We have enough out of line with the guidelines. Yeah.
That happens when somebody is struggling.
Yeah.
So that indicates that there's some difficulty going on. So
Yeah.
right there's less feeling of ease.
In the community as a whole. Yeah. So again, I'm not bringing this up to guilt trip anybody about it, but just as an observation that it's a signal that we can all come together and actually help support someone if things are going out of whack. Because all the guidelines, all the precepts, everything the Buddha laid down, everything that's laid out for harmony in our living is created for our benefit. And it's easy, especially in the early days of ordination, or when you're thinking about it, to look at these guidelines as just like, straitjacket. I will tell you, the first time I read Choosing Simplicity, Venerable Master Wu Yin's teachings on the Vinaya, before I was ordained, I threw the book at the wall about 3 times. Just feeling so uptight at what felt like great restrictions. I couldn't bear it. It took me a long time to come to the Abbey, I will say. But recognizing that they are for our benefit and they support and hold us. So if we're in harmony in holding those precepts, then it keeps our community safer, it keeps us safer, and it helps support us to do our practice. So the 5th one is to be harmonious in views. There are many different interpretations of this particular one. I read Master... Now this was Shengyan, right? Dharma Drum founder. I said it right? Shenyan. Yeah, he has some interesting things on this. Venerable Children has some thoughts on this. I've seen several, anyway. What I think we can apply here at the Abbey and in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in general is that when we have harmony in views, we're operating from the same Buddhist worldview. And I think that's probably universal in all Buddhist communities. It's different from the worldly view. It's totally different. Our values are, we're not striving for fame. We're not striving for success. We're not striving for financial gain and goals. We're not all trying to be, beat each other up to be the best possible nun, monk we can be. So that's a different value. But what's also true in harmony and views is that we are engaging our life on the basis of the fundamental teachings of the Buddha. We're living our life with thinking about karma in mind, aware of the causes we're creating, aware of what it is we're trying to purify. We're living our life aware that our afflictions are the enemy. And when that's a shared reality, even though we may still be operating out of our afflictions, which we do, till we've eliminated them completely, we can help each other and recognize each other in each other the aspiration to antidote and transform those. So there's a real harmony in that when we support each other that way. We also, here in the Tibetan tradition, we're also grounded in the same thought training teachings, which I think are some of the most precious things that the Tibetan tradition has to offer Buddhism, is those amazing teachings from the Kadampa masters about how to rethink when we're meeting difficult situations and use that as our path to transform adversity into the joy and courage of the path. When we're living in a community where we're trying to practice those things, that kind of harmony helps us support each other. And we also then can trust each other because you know that we're all trying to practice that. We're at different levels with it. We're even at different levels of familiarity with it. But we can trust that we're all working from that point of view. So that's a harmony in views. Let's see what else Venerable said. Okay. Community decisions, this is important, are made from a viewpoint that is quite different from the usual societal criteria. So because we're sharing the same views in our practice, we're also trying to bring those views into the community decisions about how we govern and live and administer the monastery itself also. So we're coming from a different place. I can give a small example of that without going into a lot of detail, but because my role since the Abbey was founded has been a part of inviting generosity. And I had some years of experience as a fundraiser, a development director in nonprofit theater. So there's all these ways that one should approach this fundraising thing. But for the monastery, we're not into fundraising. We do need support. But it's more from an educational point of view of trying to explain or making clear that the monastery serves society, and the society can return that service by providing for the material welfare for the monastery to continue to do its work. Well, that's a different point of view than trying to identify where's the wealth in your database and who has the capacity and what do we need to do to attract that person to come here. And, all the things that we do with a good intention from the development point of view. I think it's actually a noble profession. Lots of people don't, but I do. If your heart is in wanting a good cause to happen because it needs support. But our orientation must be completely different in the way that we approach this very kind of necessary aspect. So this is one of the ways that our harmony in views supports our practical day-to-day activity, right? And then the last one is in harmonious in welfare. And what that means is we share the requisites. I know in many monastic communities that try to live together as community, the sharing of requisites doesn't happen often nuns living together in the same house, but all having different food and doing their own thing, has a different feel than when we're all eating from the same kitchen. One person is preparing the food for everybody. It is sometimes, I would say, way more pleasant to be able to go into the kitchen and cook for yourself. But it's not how we live. And the training, I think, that we receive from sharing those requisites equally helps our mind to cultivate contentment, to cultivate the gratitude, to help us recognize that, this is part of Venerable's mission in setting up the Abbey this way, is that we live by the kindness of others. With that awareness of living by the kindness of others, then we practice diligently to repay that kindness. We must. And it's a good motivator, I think. So sometimes, so if something special is offered to the community, we make sure that it gets out at the table when everybody's eating. It only doesn't get served when the 5 people who eat dinner get it, or whatever, or we try anyway. When the resources are offered, when funds are offered, it's shared equally in supporting the monastery. And one guideline that we have here is that if you are anywhere as a representative of the Abbey and you personally receive offerings, you give those back to the Abbey. Okay. So that we're all sharing in the resources. And in that way, too, then the people who go out and give talks don't get more dana than the people who stay home and don't. It's shared. It's all part of the whole community. So it's not practical in this culture and this time for everyone to give up their money. Venerable Children was advised not to recommend that people do that, although, because, there's always the cult accusation that can come with that. But we can only, as individuals here, we only use our money to make offerings, to travel to teachings, or for health care. We're not to use it in any other way, buy our own stuff. So, and also, I don't know if everyone had this, but you're invited to mentally offer your bank account to the Abbey when you ordain, which I personally found very meaningful to do. I literally gave Venerable my checkbook. She said, "Okay, thank you." She gave it back, but I'm aware of it. I'm aware it's not mine. So this leads to just a few more minutes on this. So these are the 6 harmonies. And it comes back to, again, a monastic sharing these welfare without reservation, a monastic who is sharing their views, common, monastics that are living together physically, verbally, and mentally in harmony is a principle that creates cordiality, a principle of cordiality that creates affection and respect, and conduces to cohesiveness, non-dispute, concord, and unity. So this kind of friendship is really different from what we know as friendship before we ordain. And it does, I think, take some getting used to. Because what do we expect from our friends? They tell us how much they like us. They tell us we're great. They tell us we're what? They're happy to, look in our face. "Oh, honey, you look a little sad today. Are you okay?" Like, they support our jealousies. Oh, yes, they do. Yes, they do. And they know our weak spots, so they shore us up. They know I need reassurance a lot. So they tell me, "I think you're great. I love you." Blah, 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 blah. You don't hear that here. Sometimes you can ask for it. Just tell me you love me, whether you mean it or not. Yeah, tell a story.
The Abhayagiri monks visited us, a few of them, maybe 5 or 6, a couple of years ago. And I remember so clearly being in Ananda downstairs by the water heater, and we were talking about, he was saying, yeah, we have these really, sappy singer-songwriter types that live at Abhayagiri, meaning overly sensitive. And he said, and so it's kind of like this. Tell me you love me, even if it's not true. Just tell me you love me, and that's kind of that's the feeling inside. Like you want somebody to just praise you or whatever it is, even if it's not true. You just want to hear it. It was really funny when he said it. I could relate.
Could you relate?
Oh, I don't have that particular one, but I could understand that.
Yeah.
That state of mind. And I thought it was very well put. It was very poignant.
Yeah, very pointed.
Tell me you love me.
Tell me you love me, even if it's not true. Anybody here have that? Yeah, I haven't. You're looking for that feedback, looking for that they like me, looking for that reassurance that I have a place, looking for that reassurance that my contribution is valued, looking. It's called attachment. It's called attachment. And I mean, it's one of the manifestations. We all have it of different forms, right? And one of the things that's interesting about living together in these 6 harmonies with love, he doesn't mind using that word, looking at each other with loving eyes, speaking lovingly of each other in public and in private, behind their backs. But what we're not doing is holding each other with attachment. And as human beings born in our same old dysfunctional families, we don't know how to do that. We have no framework whatsoever. Attachment is the water we swim in from conception on. Perhaps your mother was the kind of mother who sang to the little baby once you knew she was pregnant, she's singing, or you had a mother who was trying to pretend that you weren't there. Either way, you suffer. Right? Before you're even out. And as soon as you're out, it just gets worse. They're all tendrils hanging on to us. And so, however we grew up in the family, we're still looking for that feedback to validate who and what we are. And then you come to the Sangha, and the Sangha is not doing that. And your teacher is not doing that. I remember distinctly saying to Venerable Children early after I moved to the Abbey, or maybe before then, I said, don't ever praise me. I'll never be able to trust you. And that was true. I knew it was true. Well, honey, she followed my direction. No. I mean, I get support. It's true. But to work against the fact that there's not direct praise there because this teacher knows it is poison for me. It is poison. I know it's poison for me. But even knowing that, not getting it, has been excruciating. And I would say today, I'm in a really, really different place with it. I can owe that to my teacher and also, to the community, not falling for my hooks. Not falling for the little tricks that I could do. I could dance 1,000 different ways, sing 100,000 songs, and get the feedback, the approval, the applause. So that was so much a part of my identity before. So if we're used to, and we're all used to that in some way or another. We're used to being acknowledged for being smart. We're used to being acknowledged for being athletic. We're used to being acknowledged for being cute. Whatever. And we've all devised strategies in our lives to get the feedback that makes us feel like who we are, that makes us feel valuable. And then you come to the Sangha, and none of that currency, and it's like Confederate money, useless. Useless. And then we don't know how to cope. Do I belong here? Do they like me? Do I have a place? Am I worth it? Am I worth it? We have to look at ourselves. Where's my worth? What makes me worthy? We really have to start maybe rebuilding all over, not trying to reconstruct a new identity, because that'll just get torn down again. But maybe for the first time in our lives, beginning to acknowledge internally what is the source of my self-confidence. That I think is particularly a problem for those of us raised in the world of original sin and, you know, the basic badness of being human and all of those things. We have a lot to overcome. It's just a part of our culture. It's part of being in the world. I mean, I don't know how strong the original sin gospel is in Singapore, but I sure know an awful lot of people that are striving to be perfect for, I mean, the Chinese culture has its own version of this, right? She laughs. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So these 6 harmonies, I think of being in community are a beautiful teaching on how we can support each other to grow our own self-confidence without the song and dance, to learn to love and live together without the games, without the shtick. I don't have to do the shtick, and I don't have to respond to your shtick. But we do have to come to trust some fundamental things, that we share the same values, that we recognize in each other the aspiration that brought us here, that we recognize in each other the capacity to change and to grow, that we practice seeing our fundamental Buddha potential, and that we practice seeing each other's good qualities, and we practice seeing our own. Not in a way that makes us more prideful, but in a way that really acknowledges, I have gifts, I have talents, there are things I can offer, which I can do without being flashy, without being presentational. I can do it quietly and also without being special. Oh, ouch, not special. No, not special. Somebody in the community said this, and I don't know who it was, but I wrote this quote down when I gave this talk to the Unitarians. Every little bit of good we do contributes to the greater good. And when we do good as a group, there is so much more force and momentum behind it. Because it takes effort to build and maintain community. It takes effort to settle the disagreements. And there are disagreements every day, right? We're human. Ordinary. Well, I am. I suppose some of you are ordinary humans too. It takes effort to settle the disagreements. It takes effort for everybody to pitch in. It takes effort for everybody to do whatever they are able to do. And then it takes effort to appreciate the qualities that everybody brings. We have to retrain our minds. But when a group is in harmony and focused on the common good and the greater good, then there's a genuine contribution to the health and the well-being of the community as a whole, to the Sangha of the 10 directions as a whole. I would say that here at Sravasti Abbey and also at Luminary Temple, and the places where the Sangha is really working to live as Buddha Dharma Sangha, the effort required to bring community together has an impact that's quite up to the Sangha of 10 directions, far into the future. And then, of course, it brings to the well-being of all the extended community and to the health of the world. You know, I think it's absolutely true. And when the community is in discord and disagreement, only harm and bitterness can remain if we don't repair it. So that's the teaching on the 6 harmonies. It's 9:59. Let's take comments for 10 minutes. I'm following my teacher, okay? Any thoughts or comments on it?
Thing I thought might be helpful, just on the one about the harmony of precepts. I was struck the last time we had one of our recent Vinaya classes that it made me realize that it takes time for us to grow into the precepts as monastics. We kind of, at least most of us in the room, it seemed like we don't start kind of getting it. We don't get what how they function or what they're for. We kind of see them as maybe rules, and they were a little hard to relate to for many people. So I think it's one of those things of living it, and then so if you're having that experience, that's why I'm saying this, because it's the living it that makes these things come alive, and then you see how they help and what they're about. Sometimes when you read the book, you want to throw it against the wall. As you said, I didn't do that, but I just was listening in the group, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of people here who just don't feel natural, and they don't quite see what's the point of some of this.
I wanted to say that I agree with what Venerable Tarpa just said. When I first took the Anagarika precepts, I very much saw them as rules and regulations imposed from the outside, but now I can really see how they benefit. And the only way to do that is to live with them. Yeah. So it does take time.
Yeah, it does take time. Yeah, it's a good point. Some years ago, I won't name the nun, but one of the nuns was ordained here, and Venerable Jindi was her acharya, I think. And the nun mentioned that she wanted to be here in 10 years and then go back to her country and help. Venerable Jindi said, no, 20 years. And at the time I thought, that's interesting. I'm sure the nun thought the same thing. But the longer I live here, and the longer I live in the precepts, and the longer I live just trying to practice these 6 harmonies, the more I see that it's not something you can push. You can practice it, but you can't push it. We grow at the rate that we grow, and it is slow. It takes years and years and years and years. And so when Venerable Jin Kerr was here, for example, someone who's been ordained for almost 30 years at this point, right? Or more than 30 years. Of course, we have the example of Venerable Children, but Venerable Children's good qualities are sometimes so great that I can't go there as a comparison. As a model, yes. But Venerable Jin Kerr was living with us. She was doing a retreat with us, so she was living with us every day. And you can just see from the body of someone who has lived in these precepts for all these years how she related to the community. There wasn't any pretension about it. It was completely natural, but definitely well cultivated and developed over time. So it's not to denigrate her practice, but also to acknowledge that the years of practice have their impact over time. Like rocks in a river, it takes a while for those river rocks to get rounded. And I guess it's rocks in the tumbler too. I didn't mean to go there, but it takes time. And we are who we are, and we are where we are, and we practice, and we just keep going. So the value of being in Sangha for the lifetime, it's worth it. Yeah.
That reminds me of a story I read about someone going to Ajahn Chah to complain about another monastic, I think. And then Ajahn, how come they're still doing this? They've been ordained X years, right? And Ajahn Chah says, you cannot force a mango fruit to ripen. So that always sticks with me. It's like, and then you can't help but have the comparing mind, right? That's the heart behind the fault-finding mind.
Yeah.
But everyone has their own time, and you cannot make a fruit ripen faster, including yourself.
Including yourself.
Yeah.
And some of our habits we've had since who knows how long, they may or may not go. But we'll work them.
I just wanted to put in a plug for one book, because I don't think I'm going to do a BBC on this. Thich Nhat Hanh has a book called Living Joyfully Together, It's very skinny and small. It's about Sangha community, and it's really helpful. And one thing that's in there that, the Mindfulness Sutra was very popular at the time of the Buddha. I mean, that practice and everything. But there was another teaching that the Buddha gave that Thich Nhat Hanh says was as repeated as often as that sutra. And it had to do with living together in community. And the main point of the whole sutra was because we have this tendency to compare, to see things outside of ourselves and not necessarily see our own faults. The whole gist of the sutra is that when you see things in others, which we tend to do easily, but not see our own faults easily, what you do is you just turn it, like you turn the mirror around and you just see, you look for that within yourself. And it's a great training for the mind when you live in a community because you're always seeing, it's not hard to find faults when you look outward. So you just train yourself, like just turn the mirror around right then and like, wow, where is that in my mind? And how does that play out in my life? And, it's a really good training. And it was very, very apparently recited very commonly at the time of the Buddha.
Yeah, thank you. And that also opens up a whole other topic of practicing humility, but we won't go there today. But this also has to underlie how we live in community. That we have to get that our point of view is not the best. It's just our point of view. And that others have equal capacity to grow.